Hi Shogi fans, back with another Bishop Exchange video again, and we've learned the chapter 1 of Bishop Exchange history in the previous video, and as I've mentioned, here's chapter 2. After Bishop Exchange became unpopular because of White's whole defense formation, in the 1980s, Black side came up with a new idea, which will bring us back to this position where White has just moved the gold to 3b in the fourth move. And actually, this new idea will lead us to what I call diagram B in this video. So from here, what we've seen in earlier videos were pawn to 2e, but instead of that, here's this new move, gold to 7h. And this is the key. He tries to keep his pawn on the F rank, not on the E rank. And you're going to see the reason later. So after this, White will play pawn to 8e, Black moves the bishop to 7g, protecting the 8th file. And then White opens the bishop's diagonal. And Black prepares for bishop exchange from White's side, so silver to 8h, right? And we can go into this position in different line. We've seen this sub-pattern where he pushes this pawn first, and then pushes this pawn. Well, then here too, in bishop exchange number 1, we've seen pawn to 2e here. But well, he can just also move the gold to 7h here, and it's going to be the same position, right? Okay, so let's go back to the first pattern, this one, although there's no difference between them. Here. Okay, now, at this position, White doesn't immediately go for bishop exchange, right? Because, 2d square is not under attack yet. However, if White wants to keep developing his pieces, he's going to have to make the bishop exchange now anyway. Because, you see, if he tries to move his silver, he's going to have to move to here, thus preparing this move in case Black pushes this pawn. He can protect it with the silver, right? But here, Black can make the bishop exchange from his side like this. Well, this means Black has lost 2 moves, including this move, and also bishop exchange is another 1 move loss. However, you see, this gold on 2b is not a very good piece structure. It's a pretty bad position for a gold to be on. So, let's say he has to move the gold back to 3b later on. So that means this gold move to 2b means nothing. So after all, White is going to lose 2 moves too. So that means there's no loss or gain. It's even. So basically, there's no reason for White to develop the silver here to 4b. Oh, well, but there is sometimes White tries this silver move. It's not so common, but sometimes he does. The reason is, Black will make the bishop exchange. And the reason White moves this silver to 4b intentionally, well, it means White's not going to make this gold move to 2b meaningless. He's going to give meaning to this move, which is this gold is already protecting the first file. If Black goes for climbing silver after this, this gold is doing a pretty good job here, protecting the 1c square. So, this silver move on 4b has an effect of not letting Black play climbing silver. But, as I've said in earlier videos, Black basically doesn't want to play climbing silver. He wants to play reclining silver. So, this silver move is very rare to see. There's no reason to do that intentionally. So, after all, if one wants to develop his pieces, he's going to have to trade the bishop here anyway. So then silver takes, and he can now develop his silver. But this time, as opposed to diagram A, he's not going to bring it to 2b because the 2d square is not under attack yet. So that means he can rather bring it to this way on 4b. And the difference of this move from 2b is that this silver is doing a better job protecting these squares on the center. So White is keeping the possibility of starting the battle, keeping the silver on here, putting good influences on the center. So that's why it's thought to be better than 2b. Okay, and if Black plays pawn to 2e, he can protect there with the silver. But as I've said, Black's not going to do that. And 0 to 3b, of course. and white plays silver to 7b. Okay, now this is diagram B, and the difference from diagram A is this pawn is still on here on 2f, and the silver is on 4b. Only these two differences from diagram A. So what practical differences does these make? Well, actually, keeping the pawn here on 2f is a countermeasure for white's whole defense formation in double reclining silver. Because if we go with the double reclining silver, and if white chooses whole defense formation, the position will be like this. You see, white doesn't develop his knight over to here, and rather he starts a castle. And black castles 2 to 8h, and the difference is black is moving faster than in diagram A. He now castled, and he has already moved the rook over to 4h, because he's just saved this pawn push of one move. And this pawn makes a really big difference in this strategy. First of all, let's save black castles, then he can start attacking, and later on there's this bishop drop, and this time it's going to work pretty well. Well, I said it's not going to work in the previous video, but that was when this pawn was here. That means if you drop a bishop, white has a good bishop drop too to 2f, right? But when the pawn is on 2f, yeah, this bishop drop is pretty good. And well, how about just moving the gold back to 4b? Well, then still black can attack. Pretty interesting one is he can drop a bishop here, and then he can take advantage of this pawn waiting on 2f, which means he can move his knight over to 2e anytime attacking the silver. So in fact, with this new idea of keeping the pawn on 2f, double reclining silver became a good strategy for black again, and the professional players started to play bishop exchange reclining silvers again. And this kind of idea that you keep the second file pawn not pushed is what characterizes the modern shogi strategies, because we see the same idea in modern Yagura openings too. In old Yagura strategy, they pushed the second file pawn very early to 2e, and they thought that's how they should play shogi. But after that, they came up with keeping the pawn on 2f, thus making the room for the knight to leap over to 2e attacking the silver, and rather do other moves that is more urgent than pushing the pawn. And finally, in the latest Yagura opening, black doesn't even push the pawn to 2f. He keeps it to 2g, and rather they castle first or develop the silver or knight to attack, rather than pushing the second file pawn. So now, let's see how we can get to the basic position of double reclining silver identical formation joseki from diagram B. Because here, at this position, diagram B, the line that leads to double reclining silver from here is a bit different from the line from diagram A, and it has to do something with the silver being on 4b actually, because as I mentioned, the silver is doing a good job on protecting the center. So there's an option for white of going into different variations, keeping the silver on 4b like this, and start the battle. Oh, and on the other hand, black too can bring it into different variations, taking advantage of this silver being here, which means he can take advantage of this diagonal being open to bishop attack. One example is he can show the possibility of going for rapid advancing silver, so white will play reclining silver, which is better against rapid advancing silver. But then black can suddenly drop a bishop here, forking the lance and the pawn, so he can take this pawn, and moreover, this bishop is still mobile because the 3g square is now open. So it's a pretty interesting variation for black. But let's not go into that for now. So the lines after diagram B is more complicated, more sophisticated than after diagram A, as you can see. So now let's see how we can get to double reclining silver from here. And as I mentioned in earlier videos, from diagram A, black played pawn to 3f, and after white plays 60, then black can turn to reclining silver and bring it to double reclining silver. But from diagram B, black doesn't have to do that. He can just go for reclining silver, and it's okay. But before that, black should push the 9th file pawn first. This is pretty important. And if white replies that with pawn to 90, now black can go for reclining silver. Well, the reason is, if black just goes for pawn to 4f, white has an option of going for climbing silver, because climbing silver is good against reclining silver, as I've said. And after that, black has to push this pawn anyway to 9f. And if white replies to that like this, it's fine for black. Practically, there's no difference between doing that now or earlier, as I've shown. But in this case, white can save this one move and rather go for this file, trying to make an attack on 70 like a rapid advancing silver. And it means this pawn push on 9f is kind of a move loss. He lost one move there, so it's not so comfortable for black to do that. Oh, and by the way, if white is going for 7e square, yeah, white has to move his king first out of that square. You know the reason, right? If white is not pushing this pawn, he has to avoid the bishop drop on 90, right? So anyway, making one move loss with this pawn push on 9f is not very comfortable for black. So that's why he pushed the 9th file pawn before he shows his strategy here. And if white goes for climbing silver, black can go for rapid advancing silver. So white doesn't do that, and basically he replies to that. And after you see that, yeah, you can go for reclining silver. And now the question is, what if white comes with climbing silver? We've learned climbing silver is good against reclining silver, so is black going to be fine with it? And the answer is yes. In this case, black is okay. Well, it's not so easy, but black can do pretty well with reclining silver. The reason is there are two differences from what we've learned in the previous video. First of all, now it's black that is playing the reclining silver. So black is a bit faster than white in the first place. And moreover, yeah, this pawn on 2f. It makes a huge difference here. Because if the pawn was here, reclining silver is pretty vulnerable to this lance drop threat from climbing silver side. But when it's here, he can't drop that lance here. So that's one reason. And another reason is if white goes with this kind of rapid attack on the 7th file, there's this bishop drop on the 5e from black's side, right? Taking advantage of the silver being here. And other than that, black also has an interesting strategy. Let's say he blocks that diagonal, and then black can push this pawn. And moreover, he pushes again and swings the rook over to here, attacking the 6th file, and white has to protect there with the silver. It's a pretty interesting way to reply to climbing silver. And moreover, black can choose a right-hand king here, taking advantage of this pawn not pushed yet, so the castle on the right side is still solid. Yeah, of course, he can only protect these square with the right silver. So basically, from diagram B, climbing silver is fine. It's no big deal for black. So white doesn't do that basically, and he simply goes for reclining silver. Okay, so silver to 4g, silver 6c, gold 5h, and gold 5e. King to 6h, and black shouldn't develop the silver up to 5f before white starts moving his king. The reason is he has a possibility of going for right-hand king, and if white does that, black wants to play other strategies than reclining silver. So after white moves the king to 4a, now black can develop his silver to 5f. White does that too. Black castles, white castles, and let's push the edge pawn here. White does that too, and pawn to 3f, trying to develop his knight. And well, white has an option of going into different strategy, pawn to 6e, which is a bit defensive, making room for bishop drop here, which is a very good square. And it goes like that. Well, that's one option, but let's only see the double reclining silver, the identical formation. So he plays pawn 72, making room for the knight. knight to 3g, and white develops a knight to 7c. Well, rather than developing the knight, he can also develop his silver here. Well, actually, this is what brings us to white's whole defense formation, right? So pawn to 4d, and rook can go to 4h. Yeah, and this is what we've seen earlier. So that's one option. Oh, an interesting one is silver to 4d here. Yeah, black goes for a second file, of course, here. But he does this, silver to 5e, an interesting variation. But anyway, let's go back to here and let's develop the knight to 7c. Yeah, so finally pawn to 6f, and pawn 4d, and finally pawn to 2e, and silver 3c. Yep. Oh, by the way, there's an interesting option for white. He can go pawn to 6e, attacking first, leaving the 2d square. Yeah, this is pretty interesting one. But let's say just silver to 3c. So this is what we've seen already in the previous video from diagram A. Yeah, it's exactly the same position. Identical formation of bishop exchange double reclining silver. Okay, so finally they started playing this strategy again, and they explored more and more deeply into this strategy than before, than when it was from diagram A. Sometimes white found a good move, and then black finds another good move. White finds another one, black finds another one. Yeah, that kind of struggles with professional players. But basically, the latest conclusion is it might be a little bit good for black. Yeah, still a little bit good for black. However, this strategy is not so often played these days because there came another very novel strategy that is, chapter 3 of bishop exchange history, which is white's one turn lost bishop exchange. I'm sure you heard about this strategy. So in the next video, bishop exchange number 4, we're going to cover that very interesting strategy. So hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.